everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation, right here at the Nation. We have Waldorf here with you. A little bit late on this Wednesday. So to explain what happened, why I'm on like so late, had a little bit of an internet issue. Apparently, most of the Eastern Seaboard, at least people who have Charter Spectrum, were having internet issues. Basically, the internet would not connect for a damn. So, wouldn't do anything. So that sucked. So it left me without a lot of time to put together a show. That sucks. But we are here. We at least have something for you guys. We've got a few stories that I'd like to talk about. Just a couple of things from the Trump-Putin thing. Then we have, of course, really important stuff on dark money. So that's dark money. That's money that we don't know who's giving it to the politicians, or the super PACs. So, oh man, that is a disastrous change if you care about money and politics. Then we have Joe Lieberman. He's back. And you won't believe what he says about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or maybe you will. Fascinating. And then, of course, I think we'll also talk about the presidents. I'm sorry, not the presidents. We're going to talk about, real quickly, the Democrats' efforts to pin corruption on the Republicans. That's fascinating. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So, again, that's what we have today. Again, I couldn't put together all the stuff that I wanted to put together today, including, for example, Elon Musk being outed as a giant Republican donor. That's crazy stuff. But, we'll get to that hopefully tomorrow when I have a little bit more time to put a show together. But anyway, so let's move on. Let's get into the stories of the day. Oh, and if you haven't already, please give us a share. All right. So we'll start out with fun. Just something to ease you kind of into the day. So on Monday, you guys remember that President Trump held a press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And of course, during that conference, he refused to hold Putin accountable for that country's efforts to disrupt our elections. Now, Trump said, look, President Putin just said it's not Russia. I don't see any reason why it would be Russia. Okay. Later on, he goes and he kind of does a little bit of a correction, like, I don't know, it wouldn't be Russian. But then again, it's other people. It's other people. In fact, yesterday I talked about the massive fallout from that, where you had members of Fox News that were criticizing him, people like Maria Bartiromo. Now, she's one of the biggest Trump ass-kissers I've ever seen. And yet even she had to concede, oh, yeah, this is bad. You had Brian Kilmeade, people on Fox and Friends. And so Trump watched this, and at first he was enraged that people were not actually defending him. And then later on, he was convinced that he should walk it back. In fact, he says that he misspoke. Quote, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia meddling in the 2016 election took place. I would like to clarify a key sentence in my remarks. I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Now, what's funny is that after he had originally said that, oh, no, I don't see why it would be Russia. By the way, I want to go and see the server. Well, what server? Well, the DNC server. So he brings it back to Hillary's emails, the DNC server, and all that stuff. And then George Soros got thrown himself in there too by Putin. And look, it seemed to be pretty clear what he meant to say. So I don't really buy his, oh no, guys, I misspoke. That's all. I misspoke. But anyway, now, and let me use that as sort of a springboard to go to this next statement. He added, it could be other people also. a lot of people out there was no collusion at all. Well, no, wait a minute. You're talking about how, well, I accept the intelligence agencies when they said that we were hacked, that the DNC, and let me be clear on that, no vote totals were changed, but there was hacking into the DNC, the DCCC, Hillary Clinton, and, of course, these emails that came out, very, very relevant emails, by the way, were released. That is through the efforts of Russian hacking. Now, they did attempt to try to get into the voter database. That's disastrous, which is why, hey, guess what? Maybe we should protect our elections by going to hand-counted paper ballots and make sure that we have some sort of protections against other people, other countries, hackers being able to get into our system, which would actually make sense. But anyway, during all that, the camera caught something kind of interesting. And so this is where the fun comes in. Now, as he read, according to HuffPost, as he read prepared remarks to reaffirm that he accepts the findings of the U.S. intelligence community about Russia's interference, cameras picked up on one of the type pages a handwritten note in thick black marker that read this: "There was no collusion," with, of course, collusion misspelled. Let's take a look at that. I've actually got pictures. There was no collusion. All right, well, here's another one. The whole page. There was no collusion. Look, aside from the goofy misspelling and the fact that he does not know how to spell collusion, he may not know how to spell collusion, but it's possible he might know how to do collusion, although we don't necessarily know for sure, since none of the intelligence reports actually do say anything about him colluding with Russia, but nonetheless, I love how he can't even spell it right. Now, this isn't the first time. He's also had to make notes that remind him to listen to shooting survivors, right? Now, the card included 5 notes for Trump, including one, "I hear you." Now, this is, of course, after the Parkland shooting. Now, look, I'm just saying that if you need reminders of very simple things, there's a couple of things that may be going on here, a couple of explanations. One, you might be trying to keep your lies straight. Or 2, you might just be an idiot. Or maybe in Trump's case, both. Okay. Again, stupid, fun, and fun, stupid. Anyway, moving on. Now, following the disastrous meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, staffers in the White House were attempting to figure out how to fix it, especially after outrage from both sides had poured in. Now, Gabriel Sherman of Vanity Fair wrote about this. He said that after the criticism began rolling in, Trump, his shock at said criticism ended up turning into some anger, or a lot of anger. In fact, one Republican close to the White House told Sherman, quote, he was enraged. There is a lack of people out there defending him. How dare you not defend me? What are you doing? All I was doing, I was just trying to be, nice to Putin because I have such a good relationship. I want a good relationship with Russia. How can you not defend me? Well, how can you defend what's basically the indefensible? Look, for 8 years, we listened to Republicans say President Obama was on an apology tour because he was trying to make nice with other nations, especially after the debacle that was the George W. Bush administration, which decided to, against all norms, international norms, go and invade Iraq on our own. So Obama's like, hey, man, look, that was the past administration. That sucked. We're a little bit different. Yeah, on that kind of issue, yes. But under the Obama administration, instead of open warfare, we did have drone warfare. Now, we still have drone warfare under President Trump, and it's actually far worse. So, but I have to give you context because what Obama did is he did continue to keep the expanded military state. And Trump, of course, you give somebody like Donald Trump the keys to that, he's going to use them. He's going to use him. But anyway, now, as far as the context goes and why I'm bringing that up, is look, the Obama apology tour, I listened to Republicans for 8 years talk about that, and now we've got this, which is worse than an apology tour. This is our president basically bending the knee to another country's president. Now, I understand diplomacy, right? I get what diplomacy is. This doesn't seem like an example of diplomacy, especially considering what our intelligence agencies, what Trump's own intelligence agencies, I should say, are telling him. Besides, look, if you're one of Trump's supporters and you voted for him because you thought it was tough, he's going to be tough, right? Well, to be fair, he was tough on our allies, but not so tough on people like Kim Jong-un, Rodrigo, Duterte. I can't, for some reason, I can't think of his first name. That's, of course, somebody who has murdered a lot of people in his country, the Philippines. And then, of course, you also have Putin, which he seems to have a lot of deference for. But anyway, what happened to being tough? You talk about how you want your president to be tough, right? Well, for some reason, Putin is the one guy Trump refuses to be tough on. Kim Jong-un, he was very tough on Kim Jong-un, almost insanely so. And I remember criticizing him for calling him Rocket Man. So you might want to, I was like, hey, look, dial that down, right? But as far as Putin, can't say a negative thing about him. Can't even go and put on the sanctions, or I should say enforce the sanctions that Congress overwhelmingly voted to put on Russia. Weird. And look, to clarify, of course, and I shouldn't have to do this every time, but I do. Being tough doesn't mean war, okay? So there's this whole thing of tough being synonymous with launching missiles at things. No, that's not what tough means. War is actually the domain of the weak. I'm not saying the people who are sent off to fight it are weak. What I'm saying is that the politicians who would rather drop bombs than solve problems diplomatically, those are the people who are weak, right? Those are the people, like the people that depend on war and violence to solve their problems. That is weakness. And I'm not in favor of that. Now, anyway, moving on. How did the people in the White House feel about this? Well, among White House staff, Sherman writes, the mood was downright funereal. I'm guessing that's not good. Now, one Republican in frequent contact with the administration also told Vanity Fair, quote, this was the nightmare scenario. Now, just the fact that this was actually considered before, and like, oh my God, what if he does this in this scenario? And then he actually does it, shows you how everybody knows Donald Trump is both an idiot and is possibly indebted to Putin somehow, or at least feels some sort of bro-like connection to Putin. I don't know what, and I'm just guessing. But anyway, let me go through some of his advisors, right? Let's start with John Bolton first. Now, Bolton, according to a source, thought Trump's remarks were ill-advised. He believed walking them back would only add fuel to an outrage pyre and make the president look weak. Well, to be fair, he already looks weak. He even undermined his own intelligence agencies. He's made the country look weak. And look, as far as the intelligence agencies go, look, the FBI and the CIA, they're not working for liberals. Okay, these are not liberal organizations. And so there's some frustration here, right? So I have some frustration for liberals that are like, no, the FBI and CIA are fantastic. And you need to listen to everything that they say because everything they're doing is 100% good and great. No. Look, let me give you some examples. They've targeted liberal groups throughout the years. They've targeted Martin Luther King Jr. And now, of course, they're going after a Republican administration. Now, that's got to tell you how bad this administration actually is. Now, to be clear, right, I don't trust our intelligence agencies on a lot of things. On this one, I think they might actually be right. So they can be both untrustworthy in a lot of different areas, but be right about this. And so what you need to do is you just need to be critical of what they say and examine things based on the merit. And look, I'm looking at all this stuff, and there just doesn't seem to be any reason why they would actually lie about this. But anyway, look, to me it seems fairly clear that Russia did attempt to hack our elections and disrupt our democracy. And that, of course, helped Donald Trump. Look, Vladimir Putin despised Hillary Clinton, despised the Obama administration for several reasons, because it actually hurt Russia's business interests. Whereas Donald Trump, incredibly friendly towards Russia's business interests. So, yeah. And it seems like, Donald Trump is hell-bent on bending over backwards to appease Putin. So, but anyway, while John Bolton was unhappy about this, here comes John Kelly. John Kelly was reportedly irate. According to a source, he told Trump it would make things worse for him with Robert Mueller. He also exerted pressure to try to get the president to walk back his remarks, according to 3 sources familiar with the situation. Kelly had called around to Republicans on Capitol Hill and gave them the go-ahead to speak out against Trump. So, understand, this is kind of how Republicans work, right? So, don't speak out against the president unless we give you permission. Now, if you speak out and we don't give you permission, well, then we're gonna attack you. We're gonna destroy you. But if we give you permission, well, then go ahead and talk shit, because what we need to do is we need to steer the president back. Because right now, what the president has done is he's kind of gone off track. So that's what they do. They're authoritarians. And that's what they did. Not long after, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan both held televised press conferences to assert that Russia did meddle in the election. Afterwards, Rand Paul, Sean Hannity, and Tucker Carlson, as well as some on the left, were the only ones that were in Trump's corner on this, as Republicans like John McCain, as well as supporters of the president like Maria Bartiromo, Newt Gingrich, and even the folks over at Fox and Friends were telling him, hey, Trump, you need to clarify your position. You need to do it now, because right now you're being a Putin bootlicker. Bring it back and actually be a little bit tough, because this is what they did. And so he ended up getting the message. Kind of. Now, according to former Trump campaign spokesman Jason Miller, he said, the president sent a very clear message that his worldview is in sync with his base and members of his party. Any of these other kerfuffles, if he had addressed it the next day, we wouldn't have had that many days of things like shithole countries, for example. Stuff that he decided not to come back on, but actually to double down on. Now, the thing is, I think either way Trump goes, he's still got his diehard supporters. I mean, I saw a poll earlier today where Trump supporters were like, no, I backed the president on his initial statements, and now I'm backing him on his revised statements. It's strange. Like, oh, no, Russia, no, didn't do that. Putin said so, right? Yeah, you get that fake news media, Trump. Later on, that turned into, when he backpedaled, oh, yeah, Russia meddled, but they didn't do any collusion. Trump said so. Take that, fake news media. Doesn't matter what they say. Diehard Trump supporters are never going to turn on the president. For the most part. Look, his staff already knows that he lies, knows that he's an idiot, knows that he's dangerous for democracy, knows all of that. But nonetheless, they still help him. They're still with him. Why? It's because he continues to do the same kind of policies that Republican politicians have been waiting years, sometimes decades to do. And these are the policies that are destroying America. And so that's why they stay with someone like Trump. They're authoritarians, and they bow down to power. And right now, unfortunately, Trump's got the power. Okay. All right. Let's move on to dark money groups. That's ginger ale, by the way. Actually, I like ginger ale. All right, moving on. Now, the Trump administration has recently announced that it is ending a long-standing requirement that certain nonprofit organizations disclose the names of their donors. Now, the rules, of course, say that they have to disclose those donors to the IRS for reporting purposes. Now, the New York Times reported on this change, which has long been sought by conservatives and Republicans in Congress. Now, they say it will affect thousands of labor unions, social clubs, and political groups as varied as arms of the AARP, the United States Chamber of Commerce, the NRA, that's National Rifle Association, and Americans for Prosperity. Those are just some of the groups that are affected, but I think pretty much every lobbying group that is a 501c4, that is one of these social welfare groups, is going to be impacted by this in a positive, for them, way. Now, of course, they mention Americans for Prosperity, of course, because they're funded by Charles and David Koch. Now, I love how they mention the labor unions, right? And this is more of a critique of the article itself. They mention it as if they're on the same level as the Koch brothers. Now, anybody who's looked at lobbying disclosures knows that these Koch-funded groups actually spend tons more, millions more, than labor unions. Why? It's because labor unions are incredibly weak, while corporations and their spending is incredibly strong. But anyway, now, so the point is, overall, this is going to help the NRA, it's going to help the Koch brothers. Why? It's because, well, it's actually going to help them because they want to keep their donations secret. And the reason that they want to keep their donations secret is because likely they don't want to be known, the donors don't, for funding hideous conservative politicians and policies, but they still want their tax cuts. And they're, of course, admitting that that's what they want. Treasury officials said reporting the change, which affects contributions known as dark money, because their source is hidden, would protect privacy and reduce compliance costs for nonprofit organizations. So they don't want to be known. They do not want to be named in these disclosures. Now, does anybody here think that Americans for Prosperity is so concerned about compliance costs that that was the reason that they were demanding that the IRS put a stop to transparency? Does anybody here believe that? I don't. It's because the donors want to remain hidden. Because you don't know who these donors are. I mean, could you think of any reasons why people would like their donations to certain politicians to remain hidden, or to certain political action groups to remain hidden? Maybe you're the head of a CEO that claims to be progressive, or claims to be good on the environment. And, oh, look, you're caught giving money to Republican PACs. That, of course, these PACs fund politicians that don't believe in climate change. Well, you don't want to be associated with that, but you still end up wanting tax cuts and maybe deregulation that helps your business. That might be a reason. Can you think of anybody who's just been in the news for that? But it's not just them. It's also foreign actors, right? Now, let me give you an example here. So this is back in the primaries, the Republican primary. There's a Chinese couple. They're not American citizens, but they do own some companies in America. Now, this Chinese power couple lives in Singapore. They're Chinese citizens. They actually gave money to Jeb Bush's super PAC. I know, right? Jeb Bush.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.
They gave money to him.
Please clap.
Yeah, that guy. Now, look, that's the thing. If you have unaccountable money, if you have dark money, we don't know if the money is coming from Chinese nationals. You don't know if they're coming from Russian nationals. Or if you're really, really afraid and you're from the right wing, Venezuelan nationals. You don't know. That's the problem with dark money. Now, that said, critics denouncing the measure, said it would encourage political donations from both domestic contributors who want to skirt the law or keep their influence secret, as I mentioned. Now, Marcus Owens, a Washington lawyer and former director of the IRS Division for Tax-Exempt Organizations, said, quote, "It's a clear signal that the IRS and now the Treasury Department are not interested in any significant oversight of nonprofits. What they're doing is excusing them from filing information that is of material importance for determining whether the organizations are operating appropriately and within the boundaries of the rules." Now, as far as I know, there are Republicans, many Republicans out there, that don't want any rules on donations. No. What we want is we want to be able to give as much money to whoever we want and have nobody find out. Because I don't want people knowing that I bought their politician. Why? Because that looks bad on me. Why does that look bad on you? Maybe it's because the American people really hate it when you buy off their politicians and you destroy democracy. Just saying. Now, Lloyd Hitachi Mayer, a law professor at Notre Dame Law School, said it would also further diminish reporting requirements for these groups, and, quote, "This would make so-called dark money a bit darker." Well, that's just what Americans need. Darker money. We already got dark money. We needed even darker money. That is, again, thanks to Citizens United, unlimited dark money. I mean, look, it's insanity that here we have something called dark money in the first place. We shouldn't have that. We shouldn't have money in politics at all. But again, they're doing this because they don't want you to know that they're buying your politicians. Now, in fact, let me get a load of this quote here. This is the head lobbyist for Coke Industries. This is what they're thinking, right? Transparency is meant for the government, not for private individuals. Especially, I'm guessing, in your opinion, if those individuals are lobbyists on behalf of giant multinational corporations. Look, it's not about the average person giving $5 or $20 to a local politician. No, the problem here is wealthy people giving the maximum allowed and then giving even more unlimited dark money to a super PAC. Now, the problem with that is, of course, they use that to run ads. Now, not only does that have a huge impact on political races, especially local political races, where there's a lot of outside dark money going to these local candidates, but also the media. You ever wonder why the media is so messed up? You ever wonder why the media doesn't hold politicians accountable? It's because of the money. Look, the media is a recipient of a lot of this dark money. So, for example, these super PACs, they will go and they will spend money on TV ads that they get from a lot of these giant corporate donors, right? They'll get that money from the giant donors. They'll go and buy television ads. The television station makes money. And there's a possibility that those ads drown out the competition who might not have that money advantage. And then what you have is a corporate bought politician. That's the big problem here, right? Now, it's not the only people. We've got television, we've got the politicians. We also have consulting firms. So that's a big issue as well. Now, consultants themselves, they do play a role, right? But when you have consulting firms that charge millions and millions of dollars and they give terrible, shitty advice, and they win either way, right? They get paid either way. Well, that can be a problem too, and a lot of this dark money ends up going to pay some of these shady consultant groups. So that's a big problem. Now, let me go forward here. Now, to show you how badly that they want to hide their donors, Americans for Prosperity and other 501c4 organizations and the Coke network of advocacy groups were among dozens of such nonprofit groups to sign onto a letter sent in May to Mr. Trump and Mr. Mnuchin declaring a policy change a, quote, an issue of utmost importance. It's an issue of utmost importance. It is so important here in America. Now, look, in America, we're facing unprecedented levels of corruption in the government, thanks to this dark money. We're also seeing, as a result of that, enormous levels of income and wealth inequality. We're seeing people that are dying without health care. with health insurance that is increasingly unaffordable, wages that are non-livable, and yet Americans for Prosperity calls this utmost importance. This policy. Now, of course, here's what they based that on. The letter had accused the IRS of targeting nonprofit organizations on the basis of their ideology. Now, this goes back to when these conservative groups were all outraged because there was the IRS that was looking into their spending, right? So they were incredibly angry. How dare you look at us? How dare you look into us? Why are you not doing it to the liberals? Well, what they didn't know, or at least what they won't tell you, is that both conservative and progressive groups were targeted. So liberal groups were also targeted. They don't say anything about that, though. No, they don't care. And besides, compared to the conservative groups, the liberal groups don't spend as much, not nearly as much as the conservative groups. So it was never a consideration. No, the reality is that they don't want any oversight into their political spending. They want to keep it completely anonymous, completely dark, and basically as unregulated as they can get. Now, Stephen Rosenthal, the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, had said about this, that the change would effectively end that agency's oversight. Quote, the IRS audits tax-exempt organizations once in a blue moon, and only after many years, Mr. Rosenthal said, noting that the agency has been starved for resources and has had to cut back enforcement. Quote, it's an impossible challenge to follow the money trail at that point. It's impossible to follow that money trail because of how basically neutered and feckless the IRS actually is. Well, there you go. And of course, Republicans, upon hearing that they can't follow the money, cheered. Mitch McConnell on Tuesday called the decision particularly welcome news to those of us who intently focused on defending the First Amendment. For those of us who over the years have raised concerns during the last administration without activist regulators punishing free speech and free association, it's a straightforward, common sense policy decision. Well, that is if your common sense includes allowing politicians to be bought by big corporations and shady, or so-called social welfare groups, which they are not pushing for social welfare. What they're doing, of course, is they're flooding money into the political system. Look, this is legal bribery. Okay, you don't think they know that? No, Mitch McConnell has been on the fight to get more money into politics for decades and decades. Even Citizens United, he waited outside the courthouse like a little schoolgirl, right? Waiting for the good news. Ooh, I can't wait. Ooh, I can't wait. Did they make money free speech? Is that what they did? Did they allow more money in politics? Oh, great. That means I can make more money in politics. Terrible decision. Terrible. Look, anybody in their right mind cannot stay with a straight face that money is speech, or money should be equal to speech. And that money being equal to speech somehow does not even present the appearance of corruption. You can't say that and actually be and not laugh and not realize the absurdity of it. I guess maybe unless you're drowning in that money. And in that case, you love it. You love it. And that's, of course, indicative of Mitch McConnell. The only reason that he's still there is because he can outspend his opponents by a lot. Now, it's not just him, of course. It benefits nationals from other countries, because we won't know if they're donating to politicians. So there goes that. Look, this is the swamp. This is the corruption. And the Trump administration just enabled even more corruption on top of what was already wrong. Now, look, I understand the argument that, hey, man, look, Trump is here to expose this corruption. Well, he's not just exposing it, he's making it worse. He's making it more brazen, and he's normalizing that corruption. And that, of course, is not the direction that we want to go. We need to get the money out of politics. We need to end this corruption. We need to kick out the Trump administration and the Republicans and the corporate Democrats, the neoliberals, and we need to actually take the country back for the people. And that involves getting the corporate money out of politics. Okay. All right. Moving on here. Speaking of corruption, I'm going to take a quick break here. So we'll come back. We got two more stories for you guys to round out. Hopefully it'll be an hour. So if you haven't already, please give us a like and share. Also consider sending us a super chat because that helps the show. All right. We'll be right back. Stay right here. Round the Nation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TBT Nation, Jeff Waldorf with you. I have a super chat here that I want to read somewhere. Michael McAllister says, Dave Rubin loves dark money. Ergo, he cannot be racist. Please clap. Wait.
Please clap.
Look, any shade at Dave Rubin is fantastic. So keep him coming on that one. Thank you, Michael McAllister, for making me laugh. I need to get on those T-shirts so I can actually start selling them to you guys and giving them to you guys as well. Okay, so let's move on here. Let's go into. Hey, we've got corruption. We had a corruption story the last story, so now we're going to start with another corruption story. Fun times. But this might have positive implications. Let's get into it. So we all know the Trump administration is incredibly corrupt. Let's just look at the cabinet. We've had so many cabinet members under the Trump administration. Scott Pruitt, one of them. We had Tom Price, another one. All these resignations from these ethical scandals, right? Now, I reported earlier that the Democrats are starting to run on, hey, let's clean up the corruption. Let's get the Republicans out. Now, I was a little bit, skeptical, I should say, because there's a lot of issues with the Democratic Party, and being completely honest, they have also issues with corruption, whether it be Bob Menendez, who, had problems with corruption, and other people that have also resigned with corruption, although not recently, of course, but throughout the last decade or so. And, of course, you have mainstream corruption, which isn't even considered corruption anymore, but that's the issue of money in politics and taking money from corporations. Now, Democrats, at least some of them, the new wave of progressives is actually swearing off corporate money, and they've gotten some of the other Democrats to also swear off that money. So that's actually a good thing, as long as they, of course, stay true to that and avoid taking big donations and big checks from corporate from corporate PACs and other big money groups. Now, I want to get to a poll here about this corruption and still this corruption issue and how it actually might help Democrats come the midterm. Now, according to a recent poll, this is a poll of 1,200 registered voters conducted for the Progressive Center for American Progress Action Fund. They found that 54% of voters across 48 Republican-held congressional districts said that they believe Republicans are actually now more corrupt than Democrats. Now, that's 54% compared to 46% that say the Democrats are more corrupt. So that's fascinating. Now, Jesse Lee, spokesman for the CAP, the Progressive Policy Group that commissioned the GBA Strategies poll, and let me just be clear about this. The Center for American Progress, that's the Neera Tanden group, right? So they're not actually progressive. They're actually more of your centrist third way group, right? So they're the centrist corporatist group. So it is kind of funny how they're being referred to in this article from Politico as a progressive group. They're not a progressive group. And it is kind of hilarious how they're talking about corruption when a lot of centrist Democrats are the ones that are taking money from big corporations. So just keeping that real, right? But anyway, Jesse Lee, spokesman for the CAP, said the fact that you have these recurring cabinet scandals, the fact that it keeps happening over and over again, it registers. People understand it's been taken to a whole new level. There's no check on it anymore. Trump isn't pushing back on Congress to keep it under control. Congress isn't pushing back on Trump. Why? It's because they're authoritarians. That's why. They're the authoritarian right. Now, look, you don't have to be right-wing or left-wing to be an authoritarian. Authoritarians are authoritarians. They can come in any flavor. In this case, a lot of the Republicans are massive authoritarians. which explains why they never push back on Trump on corruption, is because they engage in that same corruption. Hey, if Trump can do it, so can I. But anyway, now, the article notes that the corruption framing today takes a different shape than when they tried it back in 2006, when it largely revolved around the behavior of Republican members of Congress. Now the focus is on Trump cabinet members who resigned under an ethics cloud, including, of course, Scott Pruitt and Tom Price. Now, the current messaging also looks to portray the GOP tax plan as riddled with loopholes and benefiting only the wealthy. That's the same plan Republicans are holding up in their re-election campaigns as a major achievement. Well, it is a major achievement when it comes to their donors. Their donors love this tax plan. That's because 83% of the gains went to the rich. It was a plan sold to middle America, sold to the middle class, as no, it's going to help you. It's going to be more jobs. It's going to be better pay. Everything's going to be great. The economy is going to be amazing. Oh, wait. Is that happening? Well, we've got a nail company that's shedding jobs. In fact, we've had a lot of companies that shed jobs. And what did they use the tax cuts on? They bought back their own stock. So they bought back their own stock, their own shares, which increases, of course, executive compensation because they are mainly compensated in stock. They artificially inflate their value instead of spending it on workers, instead of raising wages. Now, look, if you want to run on that is perfect. That is a perfect way to frame the Republican tax cuts. Look at what they've done with the money. Republicans said it was going to trickle down. Do you see it trickling down? Is it trickling down to you? Are you getting more money? Are you being paid significantly more? Or are your wages still stagnant? I saw another recent report where inflation basically wiped out any and all wage gains this year. You're making the same as you have before. I thought those tax cuts were going to help you. They didn't help you because they weren't meant to help you. They were meant to help the donors. And so that's great messaging because that hits to the economic issues. And yes, it's not just white working class people that care about economic issues. It's everybody who works. It's minorities. They care about that too because they're also relying on these paychecks. They're also seeing their wages stagnate. They're also seeing home prices that are too unaffordable. They're also seeing student loans that are unaffordable. Run on those issues. Run on those issues. Now, the corruption issue I think is really important, but right now I still believe that they're avoiding the biggest corruption issue, and that is money in politics. You've got to get the money out of politics. That is the only way to end the corruption. But anyway, as far as this poll goes, they continue. The internet-based studies showed voters had a high level of familiarity with Trump's cabinet and showed particular frustration when asked about politicians spending on taxpayer money and perks for themselves, or when they make policies that help their big campaign donors. That is also really important. Now, look, we can talk about how Scott Pruitt spent $1,500 on pairs of tactical pants, which is ridiculous and a gigantic waste of money. And I think it is important to talk about. But that second thing, when politicians who are given money start to make policies that help their donors, that is something that I think resonates with the American people. So as far as that strategy goes, that is also a sound strategy. Now, a majority of voters, 56%, also said that congressional Republicans are not doing enough oversight of the Trump administration, and a number that's even higher among independents, at 57%, say the same thing. Now, the polling also suggests that the tax cuts are an area ripe for exploitation. Of those surveyed, 75% responded that it was serious or very serious, that 53 Republicans in Congress would get an average tax cut of over $200,000 each from a single loophole they added to the tax bill at the last minute. Look, it's not just tax loopholes that are in this. And by the way, I thought the whole point was, well, we're going to close the loopholes and then we're going to lower the rates and we'll still come out the same. That's not what happens. It never happens that way. But it's not just that, of course. It's just the whole point of the tax cuts was to give giant corporations, giant donors, more and more money. In fact, the average member of the top 1% saved without any of these, just in base level on their tax rates alone, saved an average of $63,000 a year. So, run on those issues. Run on those issues of economics. You're getting shafted by the Republicans, by their policies. And if you don't want to get shafted, we need to go left. But it's not just that. Run on healthcare. Healthcare is really important as well. Run on Medicare for all. It's 60%. That's how much it polls at. Run on free college. Run on a lot of these issues. That corruption angle, I think, is effective. But you also need to point out what you can actually do for the American people. Not just, yes, we're going to stop the corruption, but we're going to stop the corruption and we're going to actually implement policies that help you, that help regular working Americans get more for their tax money, get something in return for their tax money. Okay. Now, before I go and end that story, I want to give you the Republican response to this. You're going to like this, right? They said some study by liberal swamp creatures won't be enough for Democrats to avoid defending their embrace of the socialist left. It's not enough to wash with voters who are seeing the results of Trump's policies. That's Dennis Lennox, a Michigan-based Republican operative. No. He says, right now, people have made their mind up. Either you like the president or you don't like the president. There's no in between. Either you like your congresswoman or you don't like your congressman. The battle lines are pretty well drawn. Now, we'll have to see if that happens. But I love that, right? Oh, they're embracing the socialist left. I'm assuming he means Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who won by a massive 15 points in her primary against establishment Joe Crowley. Now, Joe Crowley represents the corruption in Washington. His main reason for being there is to raise money from corporations, to raise money from giant donors, and then to give it to other Democratic politicians. That's all he was good at. And that's why he was the number 4 Democrat in the House. He was good at raising money. That's the corruption, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her socialist left leanings, crushed that. You know why? Because she's actually against the corruption, right? She wants to see things like Medicare for all, which again is super popular. She wants to see things like college, public university that is tuition free, a higher minimum wage, protecting LGBT folks, making sure to protect Social Security, to go against war, to run on something called the peace economy, instead of what we have as a war economy. These are all incredibly popular policies. The most controversial would be and the one that actually isn't popular, the only one that isn't popular, is abolishing ICE. And that's because most people don't understand that ICE is not necessary for border security. It was created in 2003 under the Homeland Security Act. Not necessary since we had border security before. So, nonetheless, they want to paint us as the swamp creatures. No, it's not the progressives that are swamp creatures. Progressives are trying to drain both the neoliberal and the conservative swamp. And if you're trying to misrepresent that, well, then it says a lot about who you are and what you actually think about the swamp. Because right now, the swamp is only getting bigger and only swampier. Okay. Okay. Last one here. Joe Lieberman. Oh boy. And just when you thought you would never hear from Joe Lieberman again, he comes back. Kind of like a boil or a sore. Now this time he is here attacking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that you shouldn't vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You should actually vote for Joe Crowley. Wait, Joe Crowley? Didn't she beat Joe Crowley? Yes, she did. She crushed him by 15 percentage points in a Democratic primary. But wait, Joe Crowley, he is on the ballot nonetheless for November, running a third-party challenge against Ocasio-Cortez on the Working Families Party platform, or line, I should say. Definitely not on platform. So now, here's the thing. Working Families Party doesn't actually want him on the line and says, you need to get off. We don't want you. We actually endorsed Ocasio-Cortez. And he's like, yeah, it's too difficult, though. I'm not actually running. I said I was going to support her. But, I'm still going to stay on the ballot. Wonderful. Now, let's go to the op-ed here, because this is great. So Joe Lieberman comes out, and he writes this op-ed and says, vote for Joe Crowley. He said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's surprise victory over Joe Crowley seems likely to hurt Congress, America, and the Democratic Party. But it doesn't have to, because the policies Ms. Ocasio-Cortez advocates are so far from the mainstream. Her election in November would make it harder for Congress to stop fighting and start fixing problems. Okay, so this is fun. Out of the mainstream, her policies are so far left. Really? Well, let's go through a couple of them. Medicare for all. Well, that polls over 60%, right? That polls incredibly well with all Americans. Even some Republicans are in favor of Medicare for all because it makes sense. It's good policy. Free college, for example. Also, polls over 60%. Raising the minimum wage. 71% of Americans want to see the minimum wage increase, even if it means that they have to pay more for their meals if the cost gets handed down to them. Why? It's because they want people who work for a living to have a better quality of life. Well, interesting. I want people to have a better quality of life. So, yeah, most Americans do. Now, look, a federal job guarantee, right? So they asked a bunch of states, people in states, do you want a federal job guarantee, right? So if you need a job, the government is going to be able to guarantee you a job if you want one. Now, the lowest amount of support for a federal jobs guarantee, according to a poll conducted by Civis Analytics and Data for Progress, was in Utah, where it had only 57% support backing a plan. 57%. That's the low point. Higher point is states like Mississippi, where 72% of respondents said, yes, we would love to have a federal jobs guarantee. Bernie Sanders recently put out a bill that supports a federal jobs guarantee, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in her platform also supports that. New York, 71%, and a full 84% of respondents in Washington, D.C. want a federal jobs guarantee. Not only that, you had protecting Social Security, massively popular. Getting money into politics. Look, a majority of both Republicans and Democrats despise money in politics because it leads to corruption, because they are no longer represented in their area. You ask any Republican if you would rather have a candidate that is funded from out-of-state billionaires, or you would like to have candidates that are not funded by out-of-state billionaires. What do you think they're going to say? Oh, no. I hate those people coming in from out of state and buying off our elections. Those Republicans. It is a bipartisan issue. It turns out that people don't like corruption. Mainstream, right? Women's rights, fighting against climate change. Those are mainstream positions. In fact, I want to show you an image here. I'm going to go back to what the scary platform of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All right, let's get that off the screen here. That's scary. Housing is a human right. Scary. Criminal justice reform. Scary. Solidarity with Puerto Rico. Super scary. Oh my God. Curb Wall Street gambling. Restore Glass-Steagall. Support seniors. Oh my God. That is so out of the mainstream. And not only that, but of course she wants something called a peace economy as well. That is based not on war. That is based not on the military-industrial complex. Those are incredibly popular positions. But according to Joe Lieberman, she is so far from the mainstream. And now he's saying, look, if you're like me, if you're a centrist like me, you should support Joe Crowley. In fact, he said, thanks to a small percentage of primary votes, all the people in New York's 14th congressional district stand to lose a very effective representative in Washington. Fortunately, Joe Crowley and the voters in his district can prevent this damage. Damage. He's going to damage the party. He's going to damage the party. Well, wait. Are you an independent, Joe? Didn't you quit the Democratic Party? So, look, you want to ask the rest of the centrists that are actually in the party, I'm with her crowd, donut Twitter. I want to ask you guys, do you agree with Joe Lieberman? The guy who's not even a Democrat? Or maybe the whole thing is hypocrisy. Now, in his op-ed, Lieberman also recounted how he faced a difficult choice similar to what Joe Crowley is apparently going to face. Now, again, Crowley's like, I'm not running. I'm just too lazy to get off the ballot. Okay, man. He says, this was difficult to be an independent. So let me give you the quote here, actually. I ran as an independent because I wanted all the voters to decide whether I deserved to continue to serve them in the Senate. This is when he lost against Ned Lamont. It was a risk, but I concluded it was worth it to know that I had taken my fight for the kind of government I believed in as far as I possibly could. No, but wait a minute. Well, again, I'm with her donut Twitter crowd. You just lost a primary. Didn't the voters speak? Haven't they spoken? What's this about third-party spoilers? If you're somebody who said Bernie should not have run as an independent, or threatened to run as an independent in the primary, which he didn't run as an independent, by the way, you should be critical of this guy, okay? Of Joe Lieberman. There's too many Joes in this story. But look, I guess if you're a member of the establishment, I guess these things don't actually matter, because I haven't heard that outrage yet. But Jeff, he's not a Democrat. Right. Yeah. Well, oh wait, they only say that about Bernie Sanders, by the way. But as I just mentioned, Sanders didn't run as a third-party challenge. No, he endorsed and worked his ass off for Hillary Clinton because he actually has integrity. When he says, I'm going to do something, right? Yes, if I lose the primary, I will go and I will endorse Hillary Clinton. I will work on her behalf. And I won't work against her. And that's exactly what he did. Now, a lot of his supporters were actually really, really angry about that. But nonetheless, he's like, hey, man, look, I promised that I would do this thing, and that's what we're doing. I'm not happy about it. So there we go. Look, here's the other thing, right? Joe Crowley, again, promised to support Ocasio-Cortez, and then is not actually working on her behalf. So, I mean, look, Joe Crowley is about the same as Lieberman. both ghouls. But anyway, Lieberman also attacked Ocasio-Cortez over abolishing ICE, one policy plank that isn't supported by a majority of Americans. Now, he said she has received the most attention for calling to abolish ICE, immigration and customs enforcement. This makes no sense unless you no longer want rules on immigration or customs to be enforced. Now, wait a minute. Here's the thing. There's something called border control. Now, what is border control supposed to do? Aren't they supposed to control the border? Then what's ICE's job? ICE basically is now being just used to round up legal immigrants. Yes, they're rounding up legal immigrants, people who are naturalized citizens, and deporting them. So, what are they if not brown shirts? But see, Lieberman is using right-wing talking points. Let me give you the truth of the matter. ICE actually didn't exist until 2003, right? So all this complaining about, oh my God, if you get rid of ICE, you destroy any border security because you want open borders. You want open borders. But wait a minute. We had border security before ICE. ICE was created under the Department of Homeland Security. And even if we got rid of ICE, we would still have the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and the United States Custom and Border Protection. Yeah, but no, we're going to have open borders and no border security. No, this is a right-wing talking points coming from Lieberman. Lieberman, who used to be a Democrat. Well, he no real Democrat, that's for sure. Look, here's the thing. Lieberman, even back when he was a Democrat, he was a supporter of the Iraq War. That's disastrous. He was also instrumental in helping kill the public option, and was even hired by a law firm of one of Donald Trump's attorneys. He also undercut the the recount effort for the 2000 election, that same election that brought us George W. Bush. And in 2008, he supported, over President Obama, John McCain. Is there any reason we should be listening to Joe Lieberman? No. He's absolute trash. And he should not be listened to, especially by members of the Democratic establishment, or anybody who's against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Because, man, this is a horrendous article, but it shows you what no labels Joe Lieberman, what he really believes. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. I know super late today. We're going to be on time tomorrow, barring any more internet disruptions. But thank you. Appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the shares. Also, thank you for the super chats that you have sent. I do appreciate that. That helps the show. We'll come back tomorrow. Same time as normal. Same place, TYT Nation. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more videos and notifications of when we go live. All right, everybody. Love you guys. Thank you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. See you guys tomorrow.